I'm joined now by Jack Straw, who served as Home Secretary, then Foreign Secretary, under Tony Blair. Good evening, Jack. Let's start with that arms export ban. You support this, I think. Why?
Yes, I do, because I think that things have gone far too far in Israel and Gaza. And there isn't, in my view, any doubt at all that Israel is breaching international law. You can just see it on the ground in Gaza. And it's a tragedy for Israel as well, because they've lost the moral high ground that was there after October the 7th, when there was this terrible atrocity committed by Hamas. But they've gone in for killing thousands and thousands of completely innocent Palestinian men, women, and children, and excusing that on the basis that they're trying to find Hamas operatives. And they keep coming up with this stuff about how Israel takes greater care than any other country in this kind of situation ever does. And that's just, frankly, nonsense. And people can see that it's nonsense. Anybody who's been to the West Bank, as I have on a number of occasions, and just seen the interaction between Israeli soldiers and police and ordinary Palestinians going about their business, can see that I'm afraid that amongst some sections of the Israeli public and politicians, there is a contempt which extends into sort of dehumanizing the Palestinians they're dealing with. And my view, and I think it's the view of a lot of people, enough's enough.
So is the heart of your point, Jack, that it's not so much the individual incidents that we've heard reported recently, but that this is symptomatic of a pattern of behaviour, and that's what you think is potentially causing the breach in international law?
Yes, and the killing, gratuitous killing of these 7 aid workers has highlighted that. It tells us all something about the kind of double standards which are followed in the West, that if these 7 aid workers had been Palestinians, the Israelis would not have blinked. They would just said, well, it's just one of those unfortunate things, as it were. It's the fact that they were Western, American, Polish, and British amongst them, that has raised it in very high relief. So, but I mean, what's also emerged, and this comes from Israeli newspapers, a lot of evidence, for example, in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, that whatever the government and the military are saying in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, what actually happens on the ground is very different. And the individual commanders of little units within the Israeli Defense Force are the people who are deciding themselves in practice what their rules of engagement are, and if they have to pop up.
Of course, the Israeli government would take a different view about that, and they'd contest that. But let's leave that question aside for a moment. Let's just talk a bit about the effectiveness of an arms embargo. You know, let's say that we did, as a country, decide not to send arms to Israel. Our exports are worth something like 1,000th of their import of arms. We're their, I think, 41st largest trading partner. And at the moment, neither NATO nor indeed the leadership of the Labour Party supports this. It would be a pretty, it would be a gesture, wouldn't it? It wouldn't actually, you wouldn't actually expect it to make any difference to the Israelis, would you?
No, it wouldn't, no, and I think one needs to be clear about that. It wouldn't make much difference to Israel's military effort. But in my view, it would have some very, very symbolic importance, which is, I think, one of the reasons why those who are supporting Netanyahu, right or wrong, this is not about whether you support Israel, by the way. Let's be clear about that. I strongly support Israel. This is about whether you support the Netanyahu strategy, and I don't. It will set out a very strong message, particularly if we were to work in concert with many of our European partners. And I think that could easily be possible with some active diplomacy by the British government.
The Israelis would also, I suppose, say that you can do this to Israel as a state, but actually there are two belligerents here, if I can use that word, and nobody imagines that they can stop Hamas getting the arms they're getting. So in essence, this is an unequal kind of action that one would be punishing Israel for something that it didn't start.
Well, it didn't start this particular episode, but absolutely. But let's be clear about this, that there are very, very strong legal sanctions already on Hamas and supporting it. And I happened, when I was Home Secretary, to be the first British Home Secretary to proscribe, that is to ban Hamas as a terrorist organisation, to make it a criminal offence to offer any kind of support to Hamas. So I'm clear about that. But and in any case, there isn't, as it happens, an equality of arms between Hamas and Israel. The military balance is very strongly, for good reasons, because Israel is an independent state. It's not a terrorist organisation. It's tilted in favour of Israel. But we can't have states stooping to the mores of terrorist groups. Moreover, Israel claims to uphold international law. It knows very well that if you occupy somebody else's territory, you have very clear legal obligations to those
laws about
civilians in there, and they don't follow that. And moreover, if you look at, sorry, go on.
May I just ask you one last thing? You were you're a Secretary of State. In fact, I think you were the longest-serving Secretary of State in the last Labour administration. We've heard tonight that officials at the Department of Business and Trade have threatened their bosses, their department, with legal action, as it were, for making them deal with the potential or have a risk, I guess, of being part of some sort of action that supports Israel. And what they're saying, to be absolutely precise, to be clear about this, is that they would want to withdraw from doing anything that supports specific action and sending arms, allowing arms to go to Israel if it were breaking some kind of international law. What do you feel about that as somebody who was responsible for 2 or 3 very big government departments?
It's not appropriate for officials to take this kind of decision themselves. I find it astonishing that they've had a letter apparently from some other officials within that department to say it's highly unlikely that they'd be prosecuted. I think it's impossible that they could possibly be prosecuted before the International Criminal Court for participating in decisions which are taken, I mean, let's be clear about this, whether you agree with them or not, on pretty careful legal advice. And I used to be partly responsible for the issue of arms licenses or not to Israel as well as to other countries. So it's not something that I would remotely be in favour of.